Hello, Athon fans. Welcome to this week's releases and announcements and interview with Cale Plamann, who is about to join us and talk about his newest release, Blessed Time Coda, which I have already finished. I am a fan, gotta confess. But we're going to start with something interesting and unique this week. We have released a game with our new branch, Athon Games. It is actually a drinking game you play during D&D or any other type of tabletop game that you like in the fantasy genre that kind of runs along those lines. Dungeons and Flagons. So there's basically trigger draw if cards. If something in the game happens based on tropes, then you would draw a drink if card, and it describes someone, and that person has a drink. As you see an example there, if your significant other doesn't like your hobby, you have to drink. So we just loved joking around together and taking those tropes and turning it into something that enhances the game. So if it's something you're interested in, you can take a look here at this link, DNF Kick, after the Tiny CC. Someone can comment that. I normally put that in there, but didn't get to it today for some reason. So let's take a look at our new releases. We have first up Leviathan's War. This one, obviously, in the military sci-fi genre. This is a trilogy in the Leviathans series, and the first book was Battleship Leviathan, and it's doing very well. I'm going to read a review here real quick for y'all. I've read quite a few books by Mr. Martell and have never been disappointed. This is a great start to a new series. The characters are well written, their interactions entertaining, and the storyline engaging. So if y'all are military sci-fi fans, there's a great one to pick up. And we also followed that up with another military sci-fi. The Earth Epsilon Wars is now a box set, so you can get an excellent deal on that one. The Emissary was the first one, and we got a review right here for you. The Emissary packs all you could want from a science fiction debut, along with a few twists and surprises for good measure that I guarantee you won't see coming. It begins as this gritty, all-out space marine story, giving us a visceral and bloody glimpse of an interstellar war that mankind is losing, and losing fast. Then by the second half, it becomes an intriguing time travel thriller where our hero is sent back to the present day. So those military sci-fis are new releases, and I included in the little title thing Blessed Time as a new release this week. We released on a Thursday, which we normally do Tuesdays, but we went for Thursday, and Cale is here with us to talk about the book. And so, Cale, there you are.
Hello.
Welcome. So Blessed Time I think is doing very well. And I was a big fan of the first book, was excited to read the second one. And as soon as I finished the second one, I literally wanted to go and read the first one again. It's just one of those books you really get into, and I do really think it's very rereadable. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. So the idea behind Blessed Time and where it kind of came from is a kind of a fun story, and kind of it wasn't fun for me. But so what happened is I periodically, if you follow me on social media or Royal Road or anything like that, you'll occasionally have me talk about, like, I struggle with pretty bad anxiety. And one of the things that happened is I have some medication for another thing, but if I take too much of it, which almost never happens, I end up getting really bad panic attacks. And what happened with Blessed Time is I took my medication in the morning, and then I did something for work, and then I forgot whether or not I took my medication, and I took another dose. And so I had basically an 8-hour-long panic attack. And if anyone has ever had a panic attack, one of the most common things that you get from it is just this overwhelming aura of dooms. There's like a cloud hanging over you, pursuing you, and no matter what you do, there is always something that is going to, crash down on you. And that was kind of the origin of it. Is I just kind of went into this almost fit where I couldn't think of, I channeled all of that energy, that instead of thinking about how bad things could be for me, I channeled it into the book. And so it was just me plotting through this. And I really think that, there is in that series a lot of this sort of almost like Grecian fantasy where there's a fate before you and it's an awful fate and you're challenging it. And that's how I wanted to use the time loops is you're challenging an impossible fate and it's trying different iterations of how do you escape from the sword of Damocles that's hanging over your head that could come after you. So I actually wrote the entire first arc in one day, which I'm not a terribly fast writer, but yeah, well, we'll put it this way. It got expanded because it was one of those things where I sent it out to my beta readers, and the response from the beta readers is, this is a really cool idea, but this should not be 5 chapters. This should be at least twice that. And if you've read the first book, it is definitely not 5 chapters. So I had to heavily rewrite it, but that's like where the original plot, like I plotted out the first 2 books in this panic attack over the course of one day, and then wrote the entire first arc. And then, I mean, obviously I had to flesh the first arc out more because rereading it when I wasn't in an altered state, the pacing was absolutely trash. Like it was way too fast. It got to the point way too quickly. It was very jarring and abrupt. But I mean, it was a great idea. And it was one of those things where I came back and I was like, this is something I can see myself writing, 1,000, 2,000 pages of. And I guess that's the plan. And I'm happy with that.
Yeah, book 3 already has a release date, which is fantastic. I am very much looking forward to it. Yeah, I definitely could feel, and you talked about that, I definitely could feel some of that anxiety and that pressure written well into the main character. So for those of you who have not read it, the general idea is he's in a time loop, and the same atrocity is happening every single time, or he gets into other atrocities trying to prevent an atrocity. So it's interesting because we're 2 books in, and he's just really gotten past this first atrocity. But it's like, I feel like you have to be careful with time. And time, anything that you're writing or reading or movies, you have to be careful with time. But the fact that we're re-exploring the same 5 years in different ways, it never feels like a repeat or useless. And some of your reviewers shower you with compliments on this very point. It doesn't feel like there's someone specific said, there's not a single missing plot hole. There are no plot holes. Interesting, solid magic system. The main character is not overpowered, which I'm okay with overpowered characters as long as it's a more comedy. Unique take on the time rewind genre. And so I actually, when I Googled you, found out you're a lawyer. And so I was thinking about these reviews, these glowing complimentary reviews, and I was like, I wonder if it's his lawyer background, the way where you think about how do you basically, I guess you go looking for laws that kind of suit your needs and sort of looking for holes and loops and stuff like that. That's kind of almost in your training, how to overcome them. And so maybe that's why you had such a well shored up book. Thoughts?
Well, so actually the fun part about law is I had to retrain myself to write in a not boring way. Because I basically write for a living. It's just that if you read any of my documents that I am writing for a living, you'll go to sleep. It's very much over describing scenarios. And well, I guess the paranoia is there because everything in law is, what event has a 1 in 10 million chance probability that we need to write a specific clause to prevent, right? But the problem is that you just have these massive unwieldy documents that just are dry as all get out. And so what I started doing is actually it's November, so it's National Novel Writing Month, and that's really how I started doing it. It's like I have a big vocabulary in part because I read a zillion fantasy novels, and I guess I write for a living, outside of this. But I just started doing NaNoWriMo, where I would just force myself to write as much as possible. And, some of my first books were dry. Like the pacing was bad. The storytelling was muddled because I kept trying to do things too quickly. And so it's there. There are elements of it. Some of the vocabulary is there. I do have work in progress that is hiatus indefinitely about someone who uses contract magic with spirits that is very lawyer heavy. And maybe that'll get finished one day. I have a bunch of stories that are 10 chapters in, and then don't worry about it, it'll happen eventually.
It's like you got to find a simpleton like me to read it and say what.
No, I mean, well, that's the problem. A lot of law is also you have to explain things to clients. Like if you have corporate clients, maybe it's a little different, but this is another thing that I think does actually carry over to the writing is you have something complex like my magic systems. Anytime I write a magic system, I absolutely nerd out on it. I usually have 5 to 10 pages of world building documents on it. But the problem is that I always say this to other writers is world building is for authors. It's not necessarily for readers. Readers want some of it, but it's so easy to just get really excited about the ecology of your monsters or whatever and just info drop for 10 pages on them. So what I like to do is I spend a whole bunch of time writing the system out so I know how like classes interact with people, how gods interact with people, how types of magic interact with each other. And then that's the lawyer part and then it's simplifying it down. It's writing it in a way that I'm always writing it from the perspective of a flawed main character who doesn't have perfect understanding. How would they understand this magic? Like I might understand absolutely everything that's happening in my universe, but how would my main character, who at the time that I'm writing is a 16-year-old boy in a small port town, how would he understand all this magic? How would it be related to him from his schooling? And, you have to explain it through that lens. And, I think that's interesting, and that's another thing I always try and do is I really don't like having omniscient main characters. Every time I am writing a main character, I'm definitely writing a flawed main character that doesn't have complete information, and so occasionally they make dumb decisions because I can't think of anyone who hasn't made a ton of dumb decisions. It's just a matter of how you bounce back from it. And I mean, I think that's what makes you a main character is you bounce back from the dumb decisions to, get the MacGuffin and kill the dragon.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a flawed character, what's the point? You can't travel down a hero's path if you're already God. So
yeah, unless you're doing Overlord, unless, as you said, you're doing your comedic slice of life OP, which I am definitely a fan of that, like it's subgenre. Right. I don't know if I'll ever write it, but I very much like reading it and watching it.
That's what I'm writing right now, to be released in the future. But it's a character who basically he was never allowed to play video games. He was never allowed to do anything that his parents considered potentially addictive. And then he wakes up with wizard powers and he's completely disinterested. He's like, I'm a full grown ass adult and I'm going to go to work. And then he can work. And he's like, wait, I can use this to make work more efficient. So he finds. Yep. So that's fun. It's a fun one to write. It's a fun one to write. I don't know how fun it'll be to read, but Blessed Time. I like what you said about world building being for authors, not for readers. Because I think of Blessed Time, and I think of anytime I D&D do a dungeon master, you build a world and you let them see little glimpses, little windows into the mystery that is your world. It's no longer a mystery to you because you have written all the details, but that's how do you turn something that into something valuable as an asset to a story. And it's you show the small little pieces of the puzzle, and then those pieces come together. And I love seeing little glimpses into Blessed Time. So,
well, I mean, Blessed Time's a good example for world building being for authors, not for readers. And the easiest example is Micah has 3 types of mana based off of the 3 main gods, sun, moon, and night, right? I have math equations in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere explaining exactly the effectiveness of each type of mana on each school of magic that anyone can potentially use based upon the like origins of the how the various like sun, moon, and night are interacting with water versus wood versus earth. And that's one of those things where, like, I found that very interesting to write. I think it really helped ground me in the series. But at the same time, That's the sort of thing that I can imagine myself explaining. Well, it's like, oh, no. Night magic is only 80% effective here, which is why it's more, why it's the standard people who are fire mages are actually, well, night magic is good with fire magic, but never mind. But like, that's the sort of thing where I find it very interesting. I think that there's a small circle of other people who'd find it very interesting. But when I'm writing for a more general audience, it's kind of like, yeah, that's for me. That's not for you.
So you've written a Silmarillion for Blessed Time.
Yeah, no.
It's like most people are not going to like this, but the people who are true, hardcore fans will like to see this algorithm for Pokemon that I wrote for my book. So,
yeah, no,
you basically wrote a program for a game in a sense. So.
Well, no, we're joking, but that's I literally have basically macros for leveling Micah up. Because the
awesome.
calculations for mana, hit points, and all that starts to get so unwieldy at higher levels.
Oh man. I mean, that's next level right there. But hey, I mean, you hear stuff about some of the best authors, and that's what they did. They wrote a whole world, and then they took a tiny piece of it and turned it into a story.
Yep.
So well done there. One more thing that I thought was really amazing in your book was your character motivations. And so I was wondering if you could give tip to aspiring / current authors about how you anchored those character motivations so well.
Sure.
It's like I always knew why someone was doing something. It never felt like it was filling up fluff in an area.
So I always like, and this is a weird place for me to find inspiration from on this. But what inspires me is I don't know if you've ever watched Red Letter Media. They did reviews. They do reviews of movies, but they're most famous for doing 1 to 2 hour long reviews of the Star Wars prequels. And one of the things they did is they had a pop quiz in the middle of their first review on The Phantom Menace, where they said, here is a picture of a character without describing their gender, profession, or their outfit. Tell me who they are. Describe their character. And that kind of has always been my test for how to make a bad character. Is you need to have something beyond that for them. So anytime I get started on a story, I usually will write about a paragraph to 2 paragraphs on the main character. And there's definitely some, pantsing where the character evolves as I write. But every major side character gets at least a paragraph where I am explaining where they're coming from, what their motivations are, and if there's any sort of twist, there's there. And everyone needs to have, in my mind, at least one major character trait. Part of the problem with writing, and this is another thing from law, is that it's real easy for people to lose the plot when you're trying to explain something. And so you need to make it kind of simple. You need to paint with bright colors rather than necessarily with like texture it out. I mean, you can have that stuff in there as well, but you need to have stuff that people can see and seize on to when they're looking at a character. So with Micah, when I'm writing him, my major things are naivete turning into kind of this PTSD, anxiety, panic, with that he's masking with this false sense of competence that he's trying to put out there. Joe obviously is meant to be a very reckless adrenaline junkie type character, but there's a little bit more of a thoughtful side to her that's kind of after the fact. Trevor is just a hedonist. He is very much modeled on Riker from Star Trek. That is who I had in mind. Riker with a little bit more alcohol. And that's kind of what I do is any time I am going to be introducing characters, I want to write what they think of each other. If they don't have strong opinions, you don't have to write that. But for example, Sarah, Joe's sister. I made sure that I didn't want Micah to have too much smooth sailing. So I had her in there as someone who was initially very distrustful of him. in part because it plays into her character. But so that's what I do, is I kind of have almost like a very short D&D character sheet for every one of my characters. And I just sit down and I think it through. How are these people going to interact? How do they interact when they're in a bar? And then how do they interact when they're under stress? When there's a tough situation going down, who's going to be the first to crack? Trevor. Who's going to be the first to act out? Is anyone going to betray the group? Like these are, it's just one of these things where I sit down and I kind of make a questionnaire for myself of, in general situations, how do these people interact with each of them? Each of them need to have their own motivations for what their own goals are. And then I go through all of that. And that's really what it is. It's like, I am completely fine with pantsing. And I usually do kind of a hybrid model where I plot everything out. And then half the time when I'm writing, I come up with a better idea than what I had when I was plotting. And I write the better idea that I came up with while I was writing it. But those character sheets usually stay the same, where I have an idea as to who this person is. You need to have a strong mental image of every major character. And that's just a matter of sitting down and envisioning them and trying to think of how would they react if something happened. Just go through a couple hypotheticals with them and build kind of an idea of who they are in your mind before you get started. And if you have a strong idea, it will usually carry through into the writing when you're actually writing them.
Yeah, I know you said something on that I found very interesting and very useful. You said Joe has a thoughtfulness after the fact. And while reading the book, I feel like she was breaking character in the most interesting way. I was like, you don't see this side of her. Then when you do see that side of her, it serves a purpose. It draws you to her character more. And as a side character, as a support character, I think that's extremely valuable. If it happened to a main character, I'd be like, who the heck have I been following this whole time? But if it happens with a side character, you're like, there's a side I haven't seen to this person that suits the needs of the scene. So that's a big takeaway for me for my writing process. So thank you very much on that. So we've got book 3 already scheduled to release. I probably should have looked up that release date before I started.
It's late February, but my general hope is to finish off the last 80 or so thousand words of it during NaNoWriMo. And we had originally hoped for late January. We're booking it for late February, but that's one that, depending upon how things go, might get moved up. But otherwise, I think it's like February 22nd we're aiming for right now.
All right. Fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to it. But what is next? You said you had another project you're working on.
Yeah. So that one, I don't know if we're going to actually publish it until book 2 is done or mostly done, but book 1 is mostly done. It's called Dream of Wings and Flame. It is kind of a hybrid progression and lit RPG about a kobold. It's a monster evolution story about a kobold that is convinced that his goal is to be a dragon. And that's just what it is. It's kind of there's a fair amount of comedy to it. His thing is that other than being willing to climb atop a pile of dead bodies to become a dragon, he's very kind of like naive, cheerful, and cute. Mm-hmm. But there is no hesitation to do what he needs to get there. But yeah, it's a kobold evolution story with some comedic elements, some dark elements, but it's mostly just about a kobold doing what he needs to do to become a dragon.
That's awesome. That's fun. I love when someone plays kobold in one of our D&D campaigns, and we actually had Nord Flood, who's actually with us next week for Randedly Ghost Town. He played a kobold in our little online D&D adventure we did for Athon recently. And
Randedly is such a good book too. Yeah,
it is. Everyone look forward to next week's.
I mean, I think I'm only up to chapter 11,000, so there's still about half of it left.
To 11,000. The lit RPG genre, I'm not getting sick of it, but it is everywhere. But I think there are enough unique takes on what happens in the world that lit RPG has room to thrive. It's funny because everyone's trying to categorize lit RPG into 1,000 different subgenres as like lit RPG. It's exciting. So yeah, I'm excited to see a kobold perspective on how you're supposed to become a dragon, and then I'm gonna steal all those ideas for my D&D sessions.
Well, it's funny because it actually originally came from a D&D session.
Did it? That's great.
Yeah, no. So that character model, when I was trying to think him up, it came from what was that Mark Twain quote, where America is a nation of temporarily dispossessed millionaires. That quote. I'm probably butchering it, but I thought of that, but I'm like, kobolds are a race of temporarily dispossessed dragons, and so I had a kobold sorcerer that I think I mostly had there was a dragonkin with a backpack that I rode around in shooting like lightning bolts at people out of. But his entire thing was that he was absolutely convinced he was going to become a dragon, gave him 8 wisdom so he would do dumb crap trying to become a dragon. But like the idea is high intelligence, low wisdom. He is very bright, but he will do stupid things in the path to be a dragon. And so that was the character, and it was one of those things where like I think we played 5 or 6 sessions, and then like everyone's schedules fell apart, and I was like, this is an idea that I want to keep running with, and so it became a book.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm sure I'll be up here asking you about it in a couple half a year,
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. All right, man. Well, we appreciate your time very much. Great discussion. I think a lot of people that are aspiring authors can learn a lot from you. Just read through this book, and I think you can see the scenes, you can see the values of what you enjoy in the book, and you can turn around and use it yourself. I certainly am doing the same thing. I've thought through a half dozen things. I was like, you know what? I should go tighten this up, tighten that up. The lawyer method. So thank you so much for your time. If you have not picked it up and read it, Blessed Time, and then Blessed Time 2 Coda is out as of last Thursday. I already finished it. It was great. And so...
And also I need to shout out Neil Hellinger. He did an amazing job on the audio on this.
Oh, yeah. I did listen through the audio. I mean, I'm trying to get through 2 books a week, so I'm generally doing audiobooks. Great read, but great listen as well. We normally get fantastic audiobook talent.
Neil's a rock star, yeah.
So I haven't listened to an Athon book yet where I was like, we could have done better. No, we have some solid narrators. So, look, Neil says, oh gosh, well, thanks on Facebook. Great job, Neil. So yeah.
I hope I didn't butcher your last name there. I apologize.
All right. So fantastic time. Thank you. And look forward to having you back maybe early next year with book 3.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right.
You have a good one.
Yep. Good luck to you, and talk to you soon. Thanks, Athon listeners, and we'll hopefully see y'all next week, and take a look at the other new releases. And if you enjoy drinking while playing Dungeons and Dragons, take a look at that commercial we've posted recently and splattered all over your emails. Talk to y'all soon.